welcome to 832 Sips,
a podcast where we talk about issues and challenges in education today.
So grab a beverage of your choice and enjoy the conversation.
We're here with Melissa Burns and Brian Cameron, who are both, I suppose, educators in Manitoba. Brian and Melissa, hi. Can you tell us a bit about yourselves as educators? Melissa, you can go first.
Sure. I am a music teacher, a music specialist here in Winnipeg. I have taught everything K to 12. I'm currently, and for the past 5 years, have been teaching in a K to 8 building. And I am the founder of Middle Years Esport Manitoba, as well as the Canadian Middle School Esport Association.
Awesome.
And I am Brian Cameron, and currently I'm the principal of the Riel Arts and Technology Center, which is a vocational and career high school in Winnipeg. And I have been part of the Manitoba High School Esports Association since its inception. And I really, I think it's good for kids, and I've really been part of growing it. I'm probably the only person on the entire committee who actually isn't playing video games right now, which is an interesting thing, by the way.
What do you guys prefer for video games?
You go ahead, Melissa, because
Yeah, well, Brian just said that he doesn't.
Well, I've been playing games literally my entire life. Like, I started like infancy, like straight up floppy disks way back in the day. But my current game of choice is League of Legends.
Nice.
And I actually did play video games for the longest time. I was really I was big into Halo for years when you went through the inception of the first few games of it. And then just, I guess, being glued to the console for 3-4 hours and getting my rear end handed to me by 6-year-olds got it to be enough. So I quit.
That's my Smash Brothers experience. I like playing that, but my kids school me all the time. So
Yeah. So it was fun while it lasted.
I'm so used to my old Nintendo with the 2 buttons. All these other buttons kind of confuse me and stuff. Just mash away. But I'll throw up a softball here on this one. Just each of you guys, how did you guys get into esports?
You want to take this one, Brian?
Yeah, I as the principal of the school, what happened with us, and it actually involved League of Legends, was we had 2 programs in my building challenge each other to a game of the kids in each program challenge each other to a game of League of Legends. Now, I'm a vocational, I work in a vocational building, so parts of my building are actually outside the network because of the nature of what we have to do. So the kids were actually able to play at school. And so they competed. And then what happened was one of the kids, one thing I need to make clear, my students don't actually come to my school. They're not my students. They actually still belong to their home high schools. They choose to come to us for vocational training. And so one of them got back to his friends at his home high school, and suddenly we had a challenge between my school and another school. And we decided as part of our broadcast media program to stream the game. Well, we actually had more people watch that game than one of our football games that we streamed. And it sort of piqued some interest. And then once some other high schools found out about it, it just started to grow. And I could see that this was good for kids. And so that's how I got hooked into it. So, cool. And here I am.
And for me, it was a little bit different. I actually started my career as a high school specialist. And after doing a few terms in high schools, I ended up finally getting that permanent contract that can be very elusive to young teachers. But it ended up being in a K to 8 building. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to find a way to make it feel a little bit more within my comfort zone and a little bit more familiar to me. And something that I had been involved with before was with competitive esports, because my husband had been coaching a team at his high school. And so I was like, you know what, I don't think anybody's doing this at Middle Years, but let's just give it a go. So I asked around, and my principal was okay with it. She had no idea what it was. But she's like, yeah, sure. If you can find the gear, go for it. So we found some gear. We got into the game. We entered a tournament that was all high school students. So I walked into this LAN tournament for Super Smash Bros. With a bunch of grade 7-8 students for their first time in a tournament against grade 12 students. Ended up winning B-side. And it was such a pivotal moment for me and for that group of students that it just catapulted us into this thing that I thought it was going to be one thing and turned into something so much bigger. And that's kind of where it started.
Our next question here is, so why did you decide to bring esports to Manitoba?
Well, I just began to hear about the popularity. I mean, we knew that this was something we've known for years, that kids they're possessed by playing esports at home, various video games. You know, we know kids are staying up late, and we also know that many of them are they're connected because of it. I mean, when I walk through our dining room, our cafeteria at school, I mean, I could hear them talking about competing the night before. And so we knew that this was something that brought them together. And then when I saw them competing against another school and the excitement that I saw, I mean, it was pretty easy to make the decision to help this move forward.
Yeah.
So this connection to like, sort of like kids are doing this anyways, is that like, how do you make esports fit into, you know, the school? Like you got basketball and other sports going on, but how do esports exactly fit in to education?
So esports fit in so naturally. Like for me, when I started the program, I had started with this idea that I had noticed this population of students that just didn't quite fit in, and they kind of just survive through the school day and they go home and they play and they're very isolated in what they're doing. And so I wanted to provide a physical community for those students. And so when I started, that's really what it was. But as I got into it and as I started to develop the program, like you have to realize I started this back in 2016 at middle school level, that it was so much more than just this one group of students that I thought it was going to target, because our students are playing games. Like the last statistics that we found was that students aged 12 to 18, about 98% of them are regularly gaming in some way. And so because it was capturing so much of my student population, I realized that the connections that I was making with these students and developing their STEM skills and their soft skills and developing all their 21st century skills, like it was unbelievable. And so we're only just starting to scratch the surface in terms of the educational possibilities of this programming in our schools. But something that has really stuck with me through all of this is the piece of digital citizenship. We've been tasked to provide citizenship education through our schools, and a big piece of that today is digital citizenship. We see adults, that even teachers, who don't know how to interact appropriately online, and this gives us a safe space for the students to come in doing something that they're already doing in their regular everyday lives and allow them to learn what is appropriate. Even conversations about what is an appropriate screen name and what your screen name says about you and your values. It's unbelievable.
And to add to that, for us, it's not even the digital citizenship, but it's actually just citizenship for us, because we have really emphasized the kids now becoming part of something. And often these kids have never had a chance to represent their school in some form, some way, shape, or form. And now they do. But the reality is, in some cases, that they've actually had to learn what it's like to be part of a school team in some senses. And we've really emphasized that. So good sportsmanship, fair play. Even though the game monitors itself, we expect them to behave themselves while they're competing and represent themselves in their school well. So it's been a big emphasis for us to get them to be part of something bigger than themselves when they're part of a school team.
That's such a good point. So many of our students, they just within the traditional structure of school, whether it just be sports or just kind of some of those other clubs, lots of times we don't hit every student, right? And I feel like that's just such a good point of esports. You really do get into that different demographic too of kids, and then and further, right? So just like what you said, Melissa, is you cover like 98% of your students who are interested in gaming or have been gaming in some form. So that was super cool.
How have your numbers changed over, like, because you said you started in 2016, Melissa, and like, so over the years, like, what was your initial buy-in and where is it at now?
So in my first year that I did it, I had 2 teams of 6. So I had a total of 12 students. And then as the years have gone on, what I've actually ended up doing is that there's a lot of interest. And if I left it as a casual club, honestly, it would probably be easily 90% of my students in grades 6 to 8 that would be involved. Because with my program in particular, I establish, like, we have community gaming days, but we establish a culture of this is our team. And so if you're on a team, like, there are expectations in terms of you're going to show up to all of our practices. You're going to be there at all of our games. And so that kind of weeds out who's like committed to it. So right now my program is 30 students, and like my grade 6 to 8 student range is only like, I think I only have like 50 students in that range in my building. So over half of it.
Well, Melissa, I'm really interested in Brian, maybe you want to pick on you, but sometimes unfairly you get the stereotype that it's a male orientated, club or activity of that. What have you found, Melissa, with that? I think it's great to see a role model, with you, Melissa, for, hey, some girls sometimes shy away, guys can kind of be jerks. Same times, that type of thing, and girls are just as good. I know the girls I've seen play in my little league that we have at school. What do you find?
So it's actually really interesting that you brought that particular topic up, because I did an entire section in my chapter that I wrote specifically on data surrounding girls and gaming. And what I have found over the years has really been eye-opening, and there's definitely a lot more data that needs to be collected on this. But when I started my program in the first few years, I ran the club as a co-ed program. And so I had, in the first 2 years, it was 10 guys, 2 girls. Second year, same thing, 10 guys, 2 girls. In my third year, I offered a girls only gaming day. So there was 1 practice a week that was just it was co-ed, it was open to everybody, and 1 that was specifically just girls. In that year, I had 30 students in my program, 15 of them were girls. And it was absolutely unbelievable how much that made a difference. And so as I was going through the data and looking through the years, and this trend has progressed and has followed through the following years of the program itself, is that I'm noticing a lot of connections between the girls in gaming programs and achievement goal theory, where in those co-ed situations, it has more of the performance-based goal theory to it, whereas when we get into girls-only situations, it becomes much more mastery-based. And so they have that opportunity to learn and grow, and they don't feel the need to perform as much. And it really has allowed them to grow and become confident, especially in the middle years era or age group where they're already feeling so insecure. So it's a really exciting field of research that has very little there currently, but is so exciting.
Thank you. No, that's inspirational for sure. Thank you for answering that.
From a high school perspective, it's been a real challenge to get females in and competing. And it would probably be because it can be like any other sport, intimidating. Now, the Manitoba High School Esports Association, we've set it up right now that the schools have teams. They're not gender-based. So females compete with the guys right now. And the one thing we've tried to do to encourage it, and we're encouraging the coaches to promote this, is to have, we set the limit of the number of teams that each school can have, because we want to make sure that teams get a chance, all the players get a chance to play. It's not overwhelmed by just one school. However, we will allow 1 more team at a school level if it is entirely female or students who identify as LGBTQ or transitioning or anything like that. Then they can compete on a separate team, and the school can have another team also, if it helps to make them more comfortable to play. But the reality is it's been a real challenge to get girls to play. When we had our championship, in-person championship, a couple of years ago, there was probably 3 girls out of the 14 teams that we had competing. So it's been tough.
Looking at some of the benefits of esports in schools, I know we've talked a little bit about the 21st century skills, but what kind of skills do kids learn in esports? So we often read that, like the soft skills like communication, teamwork, and high pressure problem solving are key skills developed in esports. Can you share any evidence or anecdotes of this?
Well, if I can jump in, one of the things that we've encouraged with our kids. So, for example, one of the things that we've learned in this world, in the esports world, is that the kids often know more about the games than the teachers who are supervising the teams, because you got to have a teacher attached to the team or a coach anyway. And so what is really encouraged is a level of developing leadership amongst the players. We encourage teams to name team captain or team captains. So when they're competing, they have somebody that's leading and guiding and mentoring the kids. It's not just it's not a free for all, that somebody's actually trying to develop strategy and they're working together as a team and learn that. But the interesting thing that we're really trying to emphasize is learning how to win and learning how to lose in a good sportsmanship way, which we emphasize quite a bit. They may not be athletes that are on a gym floor or on a field, but they're as competitive as anybody I know, and they don't like losing as much as they love to win. And so we've emphasized that, you get out and you compete and you play well and you represent yourself well, but you got to be a good loser as well as you got to be a good winner. And so those are the type of things that we've really emphasized at the league level. And then, developing leadership and then representing yourself well is just as important to us as all the other things that you talked about. So.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like with the middle school level, just with their level of development, neurological development, it's really interesting to see how we can use esports and the situations that it puts them in to develop those social emotional skills. So that SEL piece is really, really important and definitely a big part of the benefit of this, and specifically in bringing it into schools, because it helps them to kind of process and work through a lot of those pieces that are really challenging in those early adolescent years. But in addition to that, we're finding that a lot of the benefits at this point from academic research perspective are very anecdotal at the moment. We don't have a lot of quantifiable data. And it is starting to come, and there are people that are starting to collect that data, but definitely is an area that needs more research to really back it from an academic perspective. However, just to give my piece of experience, I take a very project-based learning kind of approach to it when I'm working with my students, where I'm trying to get them to develop their skills within the game, but I'm also tying in different elements that they're working on in their actual schooling as well. So for example, a couple years ago when we were doing a really heavy season of Super Smash Bros., I had the students all pick a character that they wanted to main. So they had to learn about this character and do their own research. And I said, hey, next week, come share with me what you have learned. Like, take a few notes, write down what you've learned. What are some of the combos? What are some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses? Who do they match well against? Which stages should you be looking at? And all that kind of stuff. And doing it, like, it requires a lot of critical thinking. But what blew me away was they weren't coming back with just the knowledge that they acquired in terms and skills they acquired in terms of 21st century skills that I was expecting. They came back with 10-page written documents where they had put everything into different sections, and they had gone through and edited everything. They had their resources all cited. It was incredible to see that level of detail and work coming from students in grades 6 and 7 when they've never written anything in school that has ever been 10 pages long. And it wasn't even just copy paste. Like, they were putting these things into their own words and explaining it and inserting diagrams. And it was absolutely astounding.
Maybe I'll start with Melissa on this one. I'll just sort of pile in, and we sort of maybe spoke around this already, but I know, like, I've been reading that research shows that as far as sports go in general at schools, like it helps kids engage with the school, and they're more likely to remain in school and things like that. So, and again, you spoke to it already a little bit, but what kinds of like lasting connections are you seeing kids making on your esports teams?
It's been incredible in terms of making those connections with students where, like for me as a music specialist, I get very, very little time with these students. Like for grades 6 to 8, I see them for an hour and a half every 6 days. Like it is almost nothing. So I really rely heavily on extracurriculars in terms of building those relationships that allow them to buy into what I'm doing in class, to let them really know and understand that I care about them on a personal level. And like the schoolwork can come in, but like I want to empower these students. It's not about engaging them. I want to empower them and have them take on that learning of their own and really own it. And so what I've noticed over the years is that the community that they build, especially because I have it set up where it's not just a casual drop-in, this is a team and there are expectations around it. The students check in on each other. And like, these are students who a lot of times, like before this, they would have gone through the entire day and hardly anyone would have even talked to them. But if they're 5 minutes late for esports practice, oh my gosh, like they've got like 5 kids coming down the hallway looking for them. They're like, hey man, what's up? Do you need me to help you warm up your lunch? You know, that kind of thing. And it's so cool. And I have one student in particular who, when he came to my school a couple years ago, he had come from a really rough situation. And our goal was basically just to try and help him to stay in the building for a few hours a day. And that was it. That was our entire goal. Like it wasn't even having him do any schoolwork. But I found out that he was into gaming and he was really good at it too. And so all of a sudden, within that first year, he was staying half the day for school because he knew he needed to be there at lunchtime. He knew he needed to be there to play. And then when we started getting into tournaments and they were playing after school, he was staying all day because he knew he had that shot to do something really cool that the other kids couldn't do at the end of the day. And so he was staying. And like, it certainly didn't change overnight. And it certainly didn't change his participation in classes. But he was there. And now a couple years later, like he's still not your like star student, but he is at school every day. He is handing in assignments. He's not as engaged as some of the others, but a big part of that is because of the community of esports.
This is kind of a sidebar, but like I know there's more and more money in esports, like more advertisers jumping in, like you got Nike and Coca-Cola on the world stage. I read somewhere that esports, not necessarily in North America, but on a global stage, more people are watching it than the Super Bowl. There's more money in it than the Super Bowl currently. And universities in Canada and the US especially have started offering scholarships for esports. So Brian and Melissa, do you guys think that esports should be a varsity school sport?
Well, I mean, as part of the Manitoba High School Esports Association, I would say it should be a high school sport. I am not, like right now at this point in time, we're encouraged on the growth of it in the province. So we're not going to try to make a team say that they have, you know, we can only have varsity age players. Right now, our teams are grade 9 to 12. And so we left it up to the schools to decide whether or not they wanted to be varsity or a junior varsity level and split their teams that way if they have more than one. We're trying to grow the sport, and so we're trying to use the opportunity to get kids to know each other and play together. And you know, if it means that you've got kids 9 to 12 and you got one team in the building, it's tough to make it a varsity level. You're going to have to combine it. So right now it's just high school teams, and then how the schools can divide it, that can be left up to them. And we do know that the high school, the varsity level, the varsity ages tend to be a little more experienced and therefore a lot more competitive, but it isn't necessarily so. I mean, we've had some pretty good young kids that are coming in and giving these older kids a run for their money too. So right now we're not ready to clarify it as only varsity. But, you know, we're leaving up to schools. But I will tell you that if you're going to use that as a reason to launch somebody into a university or college career, the data is out there already online for these kids and how good they are for a university or a college team that's actually out there recruiting, and some do, for them to see and show their stats already. It's pretty easy to find. So, I mean, it's the individual players that get recruited. But, keeping that way for us for now is the way we want to do it.
Cool. I kind of have a side question here with the benefit with our current situation with the pandemic. You guys have been able to keep on going when a lot of other clubs and sports obviously have shut down. Have you guys found that? And what have you experienced? That more kids kind of, hey, what's going on? Because they're not maybe doing other things, or?
With us, the expectation if things were back to normal, the expectation is that the kids are competing in the same place. They're in the same room, and we can see who's playing is what it comes down to. But for now, we've made an exception, and kids are allowed to compete from home. It has to be that way because they can't be in the same rooms right now. And it's just too much of a challenge to set up kids even 6 feet apart and have them haul in their equipment if that's what some schools are expecting. So for this year and possibly next, depending on how things go, kids will be allowed to compete from home. Once it gets up and going again, we will the expectation is kids to play at school. I mean, that's where you get the team building and the bonding and the kids actually working together. And let's not hide it here. When you can see who's in front of you, you know who's competing for your school. And the one thing about this is somebody may be representing someone else or playing for someone else. And we're trusting kids are doing the right thing. And for the most part, they are. But that's one of the reasons why we've asked kids to come to the same location and play in the same spot.
From the middle years perspective, it's actually been a little bit different in that COVID-19 actually was really a blessing in disguise in terms of playing, because we don't actually have the physical space in our buildings to bring the kids together to practice. And so we have gone completely remote, and it's actually taken down a lot of the barriers in terms of networking. A lot of our school networks right now are just not quite comfortable enough to allow gameplay outside of the school building. So if we are having students compete with each other in the building and we're not relying on any sort of data transfer, then it was working. But as soon as we tried to play school to school, we were running into a lot of issues. And so this has actually been incredible because it's allowed more schools to try it, especially because we have all these teachers now are comfortable, and the school divisions are comfortable with having teachers meet with students online. And we have a safe platform set up for them to communicate with their teacher online. So like in my school division, we're working with Microsoft. And so we have Microsoft Teams set up. I have a team set up just for my students who are doing esports. And so we have all of our notifications are in there. We have our group calls are in there. And so I get a transcript of what's said. They know that the expectation that this is a school thing is really, really established for them, and it keeps it really safe and accountable, and it allows us to have that opportunity to game. And because this year we really need to focus on student well-being and mental health, and we can't reach our students the way we normally would through our traditional sports and extracurriculars and clubs, more and more schools are starting to look into this as, is this something that we could do? And I'm having a lot more conversations than I've had in the past, because right now it is one of the only options, and it is something that they can do. And to see schools start to take ownership of that has been really cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I was curious about that. Thanks for sharing that. Our next question is, esports can help students connect and plug into a world that's probably, maybe something that their parents aren't too sure about, and they're kind of foreign. But it can be really empowering to students as they learn about careers and opportunities that are get connected and that are enabled by esports. Can you speak to the context about how the relationship's been with, parents, maybe other stakeholders, even other teachers or, administrators and that type of thing? Because there's a lot of other people wondering what's going on with this for sure.
I'll start this one, because this one actually was really, the data I found on this was super fascinating. And it was interesting because it confirmed what I had been experiencing in my own program for several years. And I wasn't sure if it was just where I was, the school I was in, but it really seems to be holding true in that there's a difference between esports and video games. And so the average gamer, and the definition that they've given to average gamer, this is based on Statista. The average gamer is someone who plays some sort of video game at least 4 hours a week. The average age is 39. In Canada is 39. So it's a lot higher than a lot of people think. And so the average age of middle school parents based on Stats Canada, so the mothers of students that are in middle school right now, the average age is 41. So they're right within that demographic of people who are gaming. Now, the comparison here is now we are talking specifically about esports. So esports, your average age is 26. Okay, it's a lot lower. Your average age of viewership and I'm talking about viewership, not playing, but viewership for esports is 26, and 7 out of 10 of those viewers is male. And when we look at the teaching population in middle schools themselves, we're looking at primarily 84% of them are female. So it really puts our teachers in middle schools outside of the bracket in terms of knowing anything about esports at all. But our parents are comfortable and familiar with games. And that's something that has really struck with me, because as I've been doing this, I always have parents involved, and I always send out like, this is what we're doing. Over the years, I have had parents convince their child to join esports because it was nostalgic for them. It had nothing to do with the student themselves actually being interested. I have not once in 5 years had a single negative comment from a parent, not about game content, not about too much screen time, nothing. All of the pushback and the concern that I have encountered has been from teachers primarily. And it comes down to a piece of self-efficacy where, because this is fairly new in the education scene, there aren't a lot of models for them to follow. Because this is new in the education scene, there's not a lot of data for them to fall back on. And so it really becomes the job of organizers like myself to find innovative administrators like Brian who are willing to take a risk and see the value of this for our students and connect with them, because they're the ones that are going to support the teachers and give them the permission to give this a go and see where it takes them. And a lot of teachers, because they don't have that experience with games, they seem to have it stuck in their head that they have to play the game or even know how to play the game in order to provide that opportunity for their students. But that just isn't the case. And so it's really about helping them to see that, like, you can do this. You don't have to know everything to do this.
I'm just laughing there because I use Minecraft in my classroom quite a bit and that kind of thing. And, I'm still kind of a noob, and kids teach me things all the time, but you got to take a risk, and it's worth it. But the benefits are definitely outweigh anything else. So I really love what you said there.
So for us, like as in my role with the Manitoba High School Esports Association, we've had no contact at the organizational level from parents who are pushing back and saying, that this is not good for kids, or what are you thinking? I've had some anecdotal comments from some of the students, because I supervise my team at my school when we can field one. And the anecdotal comments just are along the lines of, are you sure that this is okay? Like, you're playing the game enough? Do you need a reason to play it more? Well, the kids aren't really playing more. They're just now redirecting that time. It's being focused at the school organization level. And so some of the kids have actually told me that what they appreciate is that because the school is connected to it, that maybe there's going to be some expectation of appropriate level, and or level's not the right word, time being spent playing the game, as opposed to some of the late nights that they were dealing with. And there is an issue out there with some kids who are playing the game way too much, late into the hours, late into the evening, and then having a tough time getting out of bed for school the next day. And we know that. But we've managed to get it out there that as part of being connected to the school, like, if you're going to be on the team, we've encouraged all of the teams to say kids need to be at school, they need to be in class, they need to be passing their courses. We expect people to be student athletes, and these are athletes. We expect them to be to perform as a student prior to becoming part of something at the school level. So some parents have appreciated that from that perspective. That now, because it's organized at the school level, maybe there'll be some management and expectations for their kids about it, because it's tough for them sometimes to manage their, make sure that the kids aren't playing more than what they have to. And then the next thing, my administrative colleagues, some of them did have a challenge with seeing the value of this, especially once we first started. I mean, there was some people who, gave me some funny looks, let's put it that way. I'm gonna leave it at that. But once we got rolling and some kids, they got excited about it. And the biggest challenge was some of them for finding an appropriate coach or somebody who knew the game, but also would send them message about their schools and say, we expect these kids to represent their school well. Because in the arena, this is an arena that's a little bit different to manage. And so that's something that was expected and they wanted to see. And so that came out of, that's one of the big things that came out of it. But we've also seen things now where the esport athletes are being recognized, especially if they win the tournament. Our first big tournament, our championship a couple of years ago, the kids, we found out afterwards that at an athletic awards ceremony that they were actually called up to and recognized. And so that's starting to see some acceptance of it and trying to make things work. So it's moving forward. It has taken some time to get some traction, but it's beginning to get going. And I will copy what Melissa said a moment ago, and that is that I've had more conversations in the last couple of months, especially the last month for some reason, about this than I've had in 4 years. And so I think it's starting to get hold.
I shouldn't say that I'm surprised, but yeah, I kind of am surprised that just like, I feel like lots of the pushback that I've seen on esports, even when just proposing the idea, it's maybe not so much the parents, it's just like the school, or in our case, like our school division is just like, well, we probably don't have the bandwidth for this, or, like kind of those sorts of concerns.
If you're going to get a team going at the high school level or any school level, you got to get your IS department on board first. And that's the way it's got to start. Start with your principal, who needs to see value in that. And then from there, you got to go to your IS department and get them on board.
That's awesome. I know, like my role is we're instructional technologies, so I'm not in the classroom, but I'm kind of like the education side of the tech, and then we have our IS department. So I think I'll definitely have to start to
twist some arms, man.
Start schmoozing.
Yeah.
If anything else, guys, and sorry, I'll just one last comment about this, is that it's getting traction. And so other school divisions are saying, okay, if it's happening over here, we can make it happen here. And so I'm hearing more and more of that.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to sound stereotypical, but a lot of IT guys, they're gaming too. So they're kind of into it from what I see.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. But they are concerned about network security. And that's one of the big reasons. First conversations we had with them is, okay, we'll make this work, but it has to be secure. So.
Kind of going back to a little bit on our conversation about parents. So popular culture in the media is that kids are leaving lives that are often more sedentary than their parents. So one critique of esports is that gaming does not encourage physical fitness or appropriate nutrition. And what would you say to a parent who had these concerns? And further, what do you say to either a teacher or a parent who is just skeptical about the value of esports in general?
And this question was brought to you by Mountain Dew and Doritos. Thank you.
Throwing in the stereotypes, I see.
That, eh?
Yeah. Brian, you want to start?
Well, I think in a nutshell, one of the things that what I've seen from this is that we're not getting a ton there may be stereotypes out there, but it's not the parents that are pushing back from us as much as the teachers and some administrators who are believing that, if we're going to encourage these kids to be playing games, can't be something that's going late into the evening. So these kids are now not able to get to schoolwork and homework and things like that. And to say that kids are living a sedentary life, I would argue that in the past that the kids were doing other things that may not have been athletic also, and that this has just been a shift in terms of what they do. There are still lots of kids out there playing organized sports. And so to say that this is impacting on that, or that there's less kids active about that, I don't know if I would actually agree with that, although I don't have a lot of fundamental data for that. When we play sports at school, there's as many kids coming out even for just intramurals as we are for when we play esports at lunch hour. So, I mean, the kids are still doing things. I'm not sure I see it, and maybe I'll just leave it at that.
So to add to what Brian has just said, from my experience, in terms of professional esports, you're actually seeing a very high rate of physical activity. And when you look at the way that they train at a professional level, they are athletes, and they are athletes through and through in that they are using nutritionists to program what they're eating. They're using physical trainers that are actually working them, because if they are not in peak physical condition, they're not going to be able to perform at a professional level in esports. And we're seeing that, like, one of the programs that I'm connected with is the Montreal Esports Academy, and part of their program, they have a really unique program where students, it's just like the professional track athletes, where they go to school for half the day and then they train esports for the second half of the day, and a portion of that time is literally physical training. And so they are spending that time. And so what I've actually been talking about with my phys ed teacher this year is that for next school year, as long as we get the gym back, is that we're going to actually be introducing a physical component to our esports team, where she and I are going to partner together, where I'll be running the gaming practice, but she'll also have that physical component for them, where they have to realize that if they're going to compete well, it means that they're physically strong, and that they are getting enough sleep, and that they are treating their body well, because that allows them to play at their peak level. So it definitely is a stereotype, but it certainly doesn't mean that they're sedentary. And it actually does have a negative impact on their ability to play if they do choose to live sedentary.
So
although the Manitoba High School Esports, it hasn't jumped into that part of it yet, it is on our agenda, our list of things to begin to encourage teams to get themselves competition ready, as Melissa just referred to, like talking about the nutrition part of it and talking about the physical activity part, because it does make an esport athlete more competitive when they take care of themselves from the physical perspective as much as from the actual sitting down and playing perspective. Yeah. So the Mountain Dew and Doritos is discouraged as much as possible.
Well, I know even my heart rate goes up when I start just playing against my kids, so being in shape helps a little bit for sure.
Yeah, I don't play against the kids anymore.
Anger management, no, sorry.
Yeah.
Melissa, are you just gonna like tie in the physical education part? Like say to kids, like you have to do this if you're gonna be on this team, or how do you envision that looking, just very briefly?
Yeah, that's basically the plan, is that if you're going to be an esports athlete, you are an esports athlete. And part of that is physical athleticism. And so we are going to be making that part of the requirement. And it's part of the commitment, just like showing up for practice is part of it, showing up for games and tournaments is part of it, showing up to do some physical activity is going to be part of it.
I was actually invited to speak last summer with a group, from a Canadian perspective, and they were mostly Americans. By Dell Canada, I got invited to speak to this, and the one thing that I took away from this meeting is that it was actually colleges and high schools all across the country and talking about their programs, but without exception, there was a training aspect to every single one of them. So the actual athletic part of it, the physical part of it, was a significant component to being a competitive esport athlete. And I think we need to begin to emphasize that more. The Manitoba High School Esports Association hasn't started that yet, but I think we will need to get to there and talk about that as being part of what we do.
Well, I think they talk about esports eventually being in the Olympics. So I think definitely you're going to have to be an elite athlete to get into that for sure.
All right, we'll wrap up this critique portion of it. So esports embody some of the ISTE standards, such as digital citizenship, which you guys spoke about, empowered learners, which we spoke about, global collaborator, and others. Do you think it's important for educators to get behind these skills, and how do esports help facilitate these skills? You can share an anecdote or anything.
Well, I'm going to actually speak to this in a kind of a different direction, but I mean, the one thing that I do like to game, even if it's just board gaming, and that's and one of the things in terms of game theory that I've learned about is that if you can make something fun, I mean, it just, the retention, the learning and retention is dramatically better. The number of times it takes somebody to learn something versus when they play it as a game versus just sitting in a classroom and in a typical classroom setting doesn't even compare. I'm sorry, I should have had that stat in front of me, but it's a fraction of what it takes in terms of time and energy and focus to learn something when it's in a gaming situation. So all of this can connect and improve learning just by making it a game. And I'm just going to make it as simple as that.
And something that I've really noticed is that when it comes to student performance and even just general success, we really want to push these students to be adaptable in their skills. It's not about memorizing facts and data. It's about, do they have skills that are going to serve them when things change? And a big part of that, especially in this era of information being so key to success, that being able to think critically, to analyze things that are coming to you very quickly and discern what is true and what is not, and how to maneuver through those situations, but also those pieces of communication and collaboration. That is what's going to serve these students. And in an esports environment, that is what they have to do if they're going to win. If you are off and you're just doing your own thing and you're playing League of Legends, I'm sorry, you are not going to win that game. It doesn't matter if Faker is on your team and everybody else is doing their own thing. You're not going to win. You have to have that team component. And we see that at the pro level, and we see that in our schools, where as soon as they are able, and even in the tournament that I hosted today, there was one team in particular where there was definitely an all-star player that we saw competing, but it was the collaboration between two other players that was so crucial to their win and their success, because they were able to read each other. They were able to adjust very quickly based on what was happening in the game. And we see that time and time again, where it doesn't matter if you are playing someone who is a higher skill level than you, it's your ability to adjust your strategy that will give you the win. And so that's something that we can really hone in on in very tangible ways with these students.
So I think a lot of people, if they're listening, I know myself, trying to start a little bit of my own and that type of thing, but give us a little bit of esports 101 setup, like how, you got to get that permission from, your principal and get, IT or IS on board. But what are some of the things like for example, we have some switches, but I know if you're playing League, you need a laptop or a desktop or something like that. So how would people maybe start, a starter kit all the way to if you want to get all guns blazing, so to speak?
I think it would depend upon, to begin with, what game you're actually going to be playing. I mean, if you're playing Smash, you're going to need a Switch. But if you're playing League of Legends, if you're playing Rocket League, which is our two big sports right now, esports right now, you can do things with a computer and a laptop. And with League of Legends, it doesn't even have to be an incredibly powerful laptop. Kids can compete, but that's as technical as it can get. But I will emphasize again, it needs to start with your administration, and then it needs to you get your IS department on board, and then it's managing. I mean, it's managing the kids and getting them there. The one thing that I have seen is that some of these kids who, because they haven't been part of something like a team, a school team, is that they're not used to the expectations of a team commitment. And we've had some teams had to fold because the kids originally said, yeah, I'm going to be part of this, but not follow through, especially if they start getting beat badly. So it's one of those things where you get the team going, but make sure that you get the kids committed to it, actually, I think is as big a deal as anything else. And I will say, even have the kids tell you honestly how competitive they can be. With League of Legends, there's the various levels from me, who is terrible at the game, to kids who are extremely good. And one of the things that we've had to do is tier the league and we will be tiering the league when we get things going again in the spring, because of the fact that some of these kids are playing against some really, really good kids, but we want them to be able to compete at all levels, and encourage them that, have them understand some of you are going to lose and some of you are going to win. And then, but commitment is the big part of it for us. That may or may not be part of the toolkit you're looking for, but for us, it's having those conversations with kids and saying, you've committed to something, you need to be part of it, you need to show up and be ready to go. Because that's been a challenge for some teams. Here's the beauty of esports that I've actually come to really appreciate, and that is you don't have to book a venue. You don't have to pay for referees. The only thing you got to do is schedule kids to be in the same spot at the same time. And that is probably one of the best parts about all of it. And so getting those kids together, we do have a convener. I mean, but there's so many things out there that do all the work for you. Even setting up the games you can find a site that does it for you. And so the convener just sort of manages any potential playing issues. One thing we have learned is that we got to keep it to once a week. If we try to go much more than that, it just creates a challenge in terms of getting through the week. And that the teams are expected to be ready to play that one day a week, whatever that day is for that particular sport. Like, for example, Rocket League right now is Wednesday nights, and we're going to run League of Legends on Thursday nights.
Makes sense. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
So our next question here is, sorry, Melissa, did you want to add on at all?
Sure, I guess just really briefly. His answer was very thorough. Mine would be much more simple than that for middle school, because you're not looking at the same level of organization when you're just introducing these games and teaching the basic skills of it. But what I've seen is absolutely start with your admin and then go to your IT or IS department. Something that helps a lot at the scholastic level, I've found, is joining the Esports EDU Discord. It's teachers and administrators from early years all the way to collegiate level, and professors who are studying it, and they have channels for everything under the sun. And really it comes down to, once you get the permission to do it, book a game with someone. Because as soon as those students get into a match with another school and they see what this is actually about, and the teacher realizes that they can actually do it, your program is started. And right there, that's really all it takes, is getting that first match under your belt against another school and realizing that this is great. Your students can do it. You can do it. Your students love it. And the rest falls into place. So that's, from the middle years perspective, that's where it comes down to. We also have seasons and leagues and tournaments and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of actually just getting it started in your school, it doesn't have to be anything big at the middle years level. You can just game.
That's awesome.
That's a good point, Melissa. Just to add one little bit on that, is that we had league teams playing from all over the province last year. So this, when we had teams in Thompson, we had teams in Swan River, competing against teams in St. Anne and Killarney, just all over the province. And the best part about esports is that you can actually do that easily. Yeah. And so now you get kids that can compete anywhere. And we're looking. I'm not aware of any teams that have played out of province yet, but that's our next, definitely our next thing that we're going to try.
That was my next question. If you want to come over to Saskatchewan, let me know.
At the middle years level, we have actually. And the reason that we've played out of province and out of country, and it has been because there haven't been, until this year, there haven't been middle schools doing this. And so our early matches were all against schools in the States. And so because I was connected to that EDU Discord and the Twitter community, I was able to find other middle school teachers who had programs and was able to get them competing. So we actually at my school got to claim the badge for the very first international middle school esports match. So that was nice. That was a fun little accomplishment.
I can feel a banjo esports bowl coming on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, nice. I'll wear the watermelon. It's good to go. We're good to go.
Our next question here is, how important is it to connect to MHSEA or other organizations like Canadian Middle School Esport Association that can help support esports provincially at the school level?
You can go ahead, Melissa.
Okay. Making those connections for me has been everything, because it can, when you're trying to start this program, especially for the teachers that do see the value in it, it can feel very isolating at first because it feels like no one else is doing it. And when you start looking on the internet and you're like, I can't find anybody else near me who is doing anything like this, it can feel like you're just a crazy person. And in the sea of Twitter, it's just like floating around in the internet ether. And yeah, so definitely making those connections has been everything, because it's one thing to have someone send you an email and be like, yeah, do this and this and this. But it's a totally different thing when you have someone sit down with you in a face-to-face video call like this and say, okay, let me share my screen with you. You click this, now let's play. And try it out that way. And just in terms of building that self-efficacy for yourself and for that other person on the other side of your screen, it's everything. And we're stronger together. And it's been made more evident this year than ever, that it really comes down to those personal connections.
We're coming up almost on an hour here, so I think we'll wrap this up with this last question. And Brian, you can go first, and then we'll hear from Melissa. What has surprised you about your experiences with Esport Leagues in schools?
Well, there was some unexpected part of it. Some of the things that I've seen. I'll say a couple of things. First of all, I didn't realize how in depth or how deep some of these kids were actually in playing these games. Like some of them they become very good because they play so much, and that was one of the things that's surprising, especially when you got this quiet kid in your class or in your school. And he comes in, and it turns out he's a ringer in one of these games, and he's so good, or she's so good. That's it's just a part of these kids you didn't know about. But there's a part of it that it would really surprise me, and and that is there's a subculture to this that you got to keep an eye out for. And there's good parts and bad parts to it, and that is the kids support each other, they get to know each other, they talk to each other, and they encourage each other and they play with each other. But there's also some bullying that takes place. There's also some racist parts of this, some gender bullying that takes place. And that's one of those things that we as an organization have really stepped up. We've already got a statement that, we will not accept that as part of what we do, and that we expect kids to play and treat each other appropriately. And so that came out of nowhere for me, because I didn't think that was actually there, but it's something we're addressing. But just how I'll finish by saying just how well received this has become now that it's sort of become entrenched and rolling forward, and that people are seeing the value of it. So
I think that's a really good point too. Sorry, Melissa.
Oh, that's okay.
Just thinking, because there has been quite a few things like out on the global stage. I would say fairly recently with, I'm thinking, just kind of like questionable conduct and kind of like that toxic environments kind of within some of the sports. So it is really good to see. And I think that's a really good step, right? Just to say that, there's kind of zero tolerance for this.
We know that there are some kids out there who did not compete because they were bullied into not competing, not playing for their teams by other kids. But we don't, it's one of those things that sits underneath the surface, and it's a challenge for us to hear and find out about. So we've put the message out there that everybody's expected to be treated well. We hope that kids will come and talk to us about it, but we know it exists, unfortunately.
Well, and an analogy that I often use in situations and conversations like this is that it's a lot like basketball, where if you only ever played street ball, it would be a very different game. It's because we are bringing it into schools, we are able to reestablish what the expectation is. We're able to have those conversations with students as to what sportsmanship looks like, and what digital citizenship looks like, and what is appropriate. And they're difficult conversations to have, and we definitely do have them, but we're better because we have had them, because they were going to happen anyway. But by bringing that into the school, we're allowing the teachers to have those teachable moments with those students. It's going to happen. We have the opportunity to change the way the conversation goes afterwards, because we have embraced it. So yes, it's ugly, and yes, it can be scary, and yes, it can be toxic, but that should not preclude it from an education situation. It is the reason that it should be in schools, and it is something that I feel very strongly about. Teachers should never shy away from a conversation because it's too scary. There's always a way to approach it, and this is just another one of those conversations that it belongs in schools, and that is exactly where it should be happening. And something that I have seen that has surprised me in esports, especially at the middle year level, is the confidence that it gives these students. Early adolescence is a really tumultuous time in any person's life. You couldn't pay me to be 13 again. Not a chance. But having these opportunities for them to work together as a team, to have a place where they belong, to have a place where they can thrive, and something that they do well is now valued at school, is absolutely incredible. And something that I've really enjoyed watching from my own students is that as we are now helping and fostering other schools and starting their own programs, that my students, without me asking them, have started to gently coach the other teams into what the expectation is within this larger esports community. That when we get into those conversations, that they are the ones that go, oh, hey, you can't say that, or you can't type that, Miss Burns is watching, or like, that's not cool, man, we don't act like that. And they start to call each other out in really kind ways. And they, like, even just something as simple as, like, before every match, my students know that the expectation is you always say good luck, and after the match is done, you always throw it a GG. And the other schools, even if that isn't part of their culture yet, because they're still new to this, the other students see that, and then they start to participate, and they start to feed into that. And and like, hearing the kids call out really good plays by other teams, it's incredible.
GG is good game, right? For all those people who might not understand it.
Right. GG is good game. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to add just one small point to that, and that is that in our world, we know that it's, I don't want to get away from the generalist idea that it's just this particular secular group of kids who are playing e-games or video games. I mean, it goes across all groups of kids. And one thing I have seen come out of it is that you get those kids now talking to each other who may not have been talking to each other previously. The kids who are athletes, who are, high-level athletes, but they're playing video games too, and now are playing with these and competing with these and sitting down and having conversations, even if it's not about esports, with kids that they may not have, because they've got this in common. And that's a really positive thing that I've seen come out of it.
I've seen that too. That's a very good point.
Yeah, very well said by everybody. Melissa, how can people find you on social media?
So you can follow me on Twitter. It's Melissa Burns EDU. And you can also follow MYEMB, so at MYEMB, and also at CMSEA Sport. There's no S at the end of it. It's Middle Years Esport Manitoba. There's also a website, myemb.ca, and also Canadian Middle School Esport Association, which is CMSEA Sport, no S at the end, .com.
Nice. And Brian?
Well, you could follow me on Twitter, although I stopped posting about the same time I stopped playing video games or Halo. So, but it's at Brian K. Cameron on Twitter. But more important that you follow Manitoba High School Esports, and that is mhsea.ca is our website. And then Twitter is mhsea1, the number 1. And then Instagram is MB High School Esports. We couldn't get the same for both, so that's where we're at. And follow us.
That's awesome. Melissa and Brian, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about esports and
Thanks for
education.
having us.
Both your guys' passion is amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's
next
awesome.
next time we do this, we should all get together and play a game together as we talk.
Yes,
Let's do
I'm
that.
super into that.
Let's get-
I'll sit and watch while you
Yeah.
guys.
Oh no,
You can be
Brian,
the
we'll play
referee.
Among Us.
Yeah,
We'll play Among Us. You'll be
we
fine.
could do that.
Thank you, Brian and Melissa, for being part of today's conversation.
You've been listening to 832 Sips, the podcast. I'm Curtis Bourassa.
I'm Dean Vendramin.
And I'm Matteo Di Muro.
Until
Till next time, cheers.